The village nurse, they planned her downfall, but fate had other plans. Some people boast because of what they have. Others remain humble because of who they are. And when life finally tests both of them, character often proves more valuable than wealth. This is the story of two girls. They grew up on the same dusty roads, attended the same schools, dreamed similar dreams. Yet they could not have been more different. Their names were Kumbi and Pero. Both were born and raised in the quiet farming community of Alulu. But while they shared the same village, they did not share the same upbringing. Kumbi's father was one of the wealthiest farmers in the region. His large farms stretched across vast portions of land. His harvests were the envy of neighboring communities. Because of this wealth, Kumbi's family carried themselves with an air of superiority. They often looked down on others, especially families they considered poor. One of those poor families was Pero's. Pero's father struggled every year to provide for his children. His harvests were smaller. The money was never enough. But despite the hardship, he possessed something Kumbi's family lacked: humility, kindness, and determination. He believed education could change his children's future. So he sacrificed endlessly. Many nights he went without comfort so his children could remain in school. And among those children was Pero, a bright, gentle, hardworking girl. From childhood, Pero and Kumbi attended the same primary school, then the same secondary school. Teachers often compared them. One was proud and entitled. The other was humble and diligent. Years passed. Then both girls achieved something remarkable. They gained admission into the School of Nursing. The entire village celebrated. At last, two daughters of Alulu would become nurses. For several years they studied, attended practical sessions, sat examinations, endured sleepless nights. And eventually, they graduated together. Their families rejoiced. The future seemed bright. But life was about to reveal another difference between them. A difference neither examination nor graduation certificate could measure. The difference between influence and perseverance. Shortly after graduation, Kumbi's father began making calls. Calling old friends. Calling politicians. Calling powerful contacts. Within weeks, Kumbi secured employment at a prestigious hospital in Lagos. The news spread rapidly through Alulu. The wealthy farmer organized celebrations. Visitors poured into his compound. Everyone praised Kumbi's success. Meanwhile, Pero waited. And waited. And waited. No influential relatives. No wealthy sponsors. No powerful connections. Eventually, she accepted a position at a small private clinic in Alulu. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was modest. The facilities were basic. But it was honest work. And Pero embraced it wholeheartedly. The day Kumbi left for Lagos, she made sure the entire village noticed. Dressed elegantly, she walked through the community with pride. Almost arrogance. When she encountered Pero, she could not resist. "So this is where your nursing career ends?" Kumbi mocked. A village clinic. Several people nearby laughed nervously. Pero remained calm. "It is still nursing." Kumbi smirked. "You studied all those years only to become a village nurse." Pero smiled politely. "Helping people is helping people." The response irritated Kumbi even more. Without another word, she climbed into the vehicle waiting to take her to Lagos. As the car disappeared down the road, she felt victorious. She believed she had won. But life was only beginning. And somewhere in Lagos, destiny was preparing a surprise neither of them could imagine. A surprise involving a successful engineer named Tade. A man whose heart had become tired of disappointment. A man who was about to meet the one person capable of changing everything. At 34 years old, He had achieved what many people only dreamed about. He was a successful engineer, a senior project manager at Sunrise Engineering. He owned a beautiful home, drove expensive vehicles, had investments, and earned more money than he had ever imagined. He was an Indian of in Alulu. From the outside, Tade looked like a man who had everything. But appearances can be deceiving. Because despite his success, one part of his life remained a complete disaster. His relationships. 3 times he had fallen in love. 3 times he had believed he had found the woman he would marry. And 3 times, the relationships had collapsed. The latest was proving no different. Her name was Suzy. At first, she had seemed exciting, confident, outgoing, energetic. But as time passed, Tade discovered qualities that constantly exhausted him. Suzy loved attention. She loved expensive things. She loved social media. She loved parties. She loved being seen. Unfortunately, she paid very little attention to the things that made a relationship work. Simple responsibilities often became major problems. She disliked learning new skills, disliked taking advice, and rarely accepted criticism. Every disagreement became an argument. Every suggestion became an insult. Tade found himself constantly frustrated. More than once, he had tried ending the relationship. Each time Suzy would cry, apologize, promise to change, promise things would be different. Then a few days later, everything returned to normal. The same arguments, the same complaints, the same disappointment. One evening, after another exhausting disagreement, Tade sat alone in his living room. His phone rang. The caller was from Alulu. Immediately, he answered. The voice on the other end brought worrying news. His mother, Bonmi, had fallen ill. The news unsettled him. Since losing his father several years earlier, Bonmi had become the most important person in his life. Without hesitation, Tade offered to bring her to Lagos. The best hospitals, the best specialists, the best care. Money was not the problem. But Bonmi refused. My son, she said gently, I would rather stay here. Tade was surprised. Mother, why? There is a private clinic in the village. A village clinic. Yes. The doctor is good. Eventually, he requested the doctor's number. Later that evening, he contacted the clinic. The doctor listened carefully, then explained the options. Your mother can come to the clinic regularly. What is the second option? Tade asked. We can assign a nurse to provide care at home. The doctor explained that home-based care would be more expensive. The nurse would visit regularly, monitor medications, check vital signs, ensure proper recovery. Without hesitation, Tade agreed. I want the best option. The doctor nodded. Very well. There is one nurse I can recommend. Who? Her name is Pero. The doctor smiled. She is one of the most dedicated nurses in this clinic. Patients love her. Families trust her. And I trust her too. The next morning, the assignment was given to Pero. When the doctor informed her, she listened carefully. The patient was an elderly woman. The son lived in Lagos. The family wanted private nursing care. Pero immediately accepted. As always, she approached the assignment professionally. The following day, she arrived at Bonmi's home. The elderly woman welcomed her warmly. From the very beginning, something felt different. Perhaps it was Pero's gentle manner. Perhaps it was her patience. Or perhaps it was the way she treated Bonmi not as a patient but as a person. Whatever the reason, Bonmi liked her immediately. And the feeling was mutual. For several days, Pero cared for her diligently. She monitored medications, prepared treatment schedules, checked her progress. And most importantly, she listened. The two women talked often. Sometimes about health. Sometimes about life. Sometimes about the village. Soon, Bumi found herself looking forward to Pero's visits. Then, one weekend, Tade decided to visit Alulu personally. He wanted to see his mother. And he wanted to meet the nurse everyone seemed to be praising. The moment he arrived at the house, he noticed something unusual. His mother looked happier, healthier, more energetic. And standing nearby was a young woman in a nurse's uniform. Pero. She was not what he expected. She carried herself with quiet confidence. She spoke respectfully. She listened attentively. And there was a kindness in her eyes that immediately caught his attention. As the days passed, Tade watched how she interacted with his mother. There was no pretense. No performance. No attempt to impress anyone. She simply cared. And somehow, that impressed him more than anything else. For the first time in a very long time, Tade found himself genuinely admiring someone. Not because of beauty. Though she was beautiful. Not because of status. Though she carried herself with dignity. But because she possessed something he had struggled to find in many people. Character. Over the following days, Tade found himself spending more time around her. Sometimes they discussed Bumi's treatment. Sometimes they talked about life in Alulu. Sometimes they discussed their dreams and ambitions. For the first time in a long while, Tade found conversation effortless. There was no drama. No unnecessary arguments. No constant demands. Just genuine companionship. Even Bumi noticed it. One evening after Pero left, Bumi smiled knowingly. "My son." Tade looked up. "Yes, Mama. That nurse is a good woman." Tade laughed. "She is very professional." Bumi shook her head. "That is not what I meant." Tade immediately understood. And quickly changed the subject. But the thought remained in his mind. Weeks later, Bumi recovered fully. The nursing assignment ended. Officially, there was no reason for Tade and Pero to remain in contact. Yet neither wanted the communication to stop. At first, the calls were occasional. Then they became frequent. Soon, they were speaking every day. Morning greetings. Afternoon check-ins. Late-night conversations. Before long, friendship quietly evolved into something deeper. Something neither of them could ignore. Their conversations became the highlight of their day. Their laughter became familiar. Their presence became comforting. And eventually, romance blossomed. When Tade finally confessed his feelings, Pero was not surprised. Because she had begun feeling the same way. For the first time in years, Tade felt at peace. No manipulation. No pressure. No games. Just a relationship built on mutual respect. Several months later, Tade made another life-changing decision. He wanted Pero closer. He wanted her future to match her potential. And so he decided to help her pursue better opportunities. Using his professional connections, he secured an interview for her at one of Lagos' respected healthcare institutions, Maxi Specialist Hospital. After several assessments and interviews, Pero was offered a position. The news thrilled her. For years she had dreamed of working in a major hospital. Now that dream was becoming reality. When she arrived in Lagos, she could hardly believe how much her life had changed. But destiny had one more surprise waiting. Because Maxi Hospital was also where Kumbi worked. The same Kumbi who had mocked her in Alulu. The same Kumbi who had laughed at her for becoming a village nurse. The same Kumbi who believed she had left Pero behind forever. The day Kumbi saw Pero walking through the hospital corridors in her uniform, she almost stopped breathing. At first, she thought she was mistaken. Surely it could not be Pero. But it was. And not only was she in Lagos. Not only was she employed. She was working in the very hospital Kumbi had spent years boasting about. The realization stung deeply. Kumbi forced a smile whenever others were watching. But inside, jealousy began to grow. Every success Pero achieved felt like a personal insult. Things became worse as the weeks passed. Patients liked Pero. Doctors respected her. The nursing staff enjoyed working with her. Her calm nature made people comfortable. Families appreciated her compassion. Interns sought her guidance. Even senior personnel began noticing her professionalism. The more people admired Pero, the more resentment grew in Kumbi's heart. Unfortunately, Kumbi was not the only person becoming jealous. In another part of Lagos, someone else was watching. Someone else was becoming increasingly angry. Her name was Suzy. At first, Suzy thought Pero was merely another friend. Then she noticed the phone calls. The visits. The smiles. The way Tade spoke about her. And suddenly everything became clear. There was another woman. A rival. A woman quietly taking the place she believed belonged to her. When Suzy confronted Tade, he did not hesitate. For the first time, he was completely honest. It is over between us. The words hit Suzy like a hammer. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. You are leaving me because of that nurse. Tade remained calm. This decision has nothing to do with her. Then why? Because our relationship stopped working a long time ago. Suzy refused to accept it. She cried. She argued. She pleaded. But Tade's mind was made up. The relationship was over. As Suzy left that day, anger consumed her. Not sadness. Not regret. Anger. She blamed Tade. But more than anyone else, she blamed Pero. In her mind, Pero had stolen the life she wanted. And if she could not have Tade, then she would make sure Pero suffered. Around the same time, Suzy began gathering information. She learned where Pero worked. She learned about her routines. And most importantly, she discovered something interesting. At Maxi Hospital, there was already someone who disliked Pero. Someone whose jealousy was growing stronger every day. That person was Kumbi. When Suzy learned this, a dangerous idea formed in her mind. Because sometimes one enemy is dangerous. But two enemies working together can become deadly. And neither Pero nor Tade had any idea that a conspiracy was quietly taking shape around them. A conspiracy that would soon threaten Pero's career, her freedom, and possibly her entire future. Jealousy is a dangerous thing. It rarely announces itself. Instead, it grows quietly. Patiently. Waiting for the opportunity to cause destruction. For Suzy and Kumbi, that opportunity seemed to have arrived. After weeks of observing Pero, Suzy had gathered enough information. She knew where Pero worked. She knew her schedule. And most importantly, she knew there was someone inside Maxi Hospital who already disliked her. That person was Kumbi. The two women arranged to meet at a restaurant far from the hospital. As they sat across from each other, they quickly realized they shared a common enemy. Both wanted Pero out of the picture. Both blamed her for their frustrations. And both were willing to go much further than either should have. Suzy slid an envelope across the table. Inside was 250,000 naira. Kumbi's eyes widened. What is this for? She asked. Suzy leaned forward. I want Pero destroyed. The words hung heavily in the air. Then Suzy explained her plan. There was a particular patient on the ward. A patient scheduled to receive an injection during one of Pero's upcoming night shifts. If the medication was tampered with, the consequences could be devastating. The patient's death would trigger an investigation. An autopsy would reveal contamination. The blame would naturally fall on the nurse who administered the injection. Pero. Her nursing license would be revoked. Her reputation destroyed. And she could face criminal charges. As Sazi outlined the details, Kumbi listened silently. The plan was cruel, dangerous, and completely illegal. Yet the bitterness in her heart had become stronger than her conscience. Eventually, she nodded. I'll do it. Over the following days, Kumbi began preparing. She secretly obtained a harmful substance she intended to use to contaminate the medication. Everything seemed to be falling into place. But when the moment approached, fear began creeping into her heart. One thing was plotting. Another was carrying out the act herself. The risk suddenly felt real. What if she was caught? What if there were cameras? What if someone saw her? Desperate to avoid direct involvement, Kumbi looked for another option. That option came in the form of a young intern nurse named Rachel. Rachel was intelligent, hardworking, and relatively new to the hospital. One afternoon, Kumbi called her aside. I need your help with something. Rachel listened carefully. Then Kumbi explained what she wanted. Rachel's face immediately changed. Surely she had misunderstood. But she had heard correctly. Kumbi wanted her to tamper with a medication vial. In exchange, she promised Rachel 25,000 naira. For several moments, Rachel remained silent. Then she forced a smile. I'll do it. Kumbi relaxed. I knew I could trust you. Rachel nodded. I'll wait until no one is watching. Good. Just give me some time. The conversation ended. But the moment Rachel walked away, her heart began racing. She could hardly believe what she had just heard. There was no way she would participate in such a thing. Not only was it wrong, it could cost an innocent patient their life. And Rachel knew exactly who would be blamed. Pero. The very nurse she admired. Like many people in the hospital, Rachel respected Pero deeply. She had always been kind to junior staff. Always willing to teach. Always willing to help. Rachel could not stand by and watch her be framed. That same evening, she requested a private meeting with Pero. When they sat together, Rachel lowered her voice. There is something you need to know. Pero immediately sensed the seriousness in her tone. What happened? Rachel told her everything. Every detail. The meeting. The money. The plan. The patient. The tampered medication. And Kumbi's role in it all. The more Pero listened, the more shocked she became. For several moments after Rachel finished speaking, she could barely find words. Finally, she spoke. We need to report this immediately. The two nurses went directly to hospital management. Soon, the medical director, head of nursing services, and the hospital security team were informed. After reviewing Rachel's account, management reached a decision. The allegation was too serious to ignore. But they also needed evidence. Solid evidence. Something that would prove beyond doubt what was happening. A plan was carefully developed. Rachel would return to Kumbi. She would pretend she was confused about the earlier instructions. The hospital security team equipped Rachel with a discreet recording device. Every conversation would be documented. Every instruction would be preserved. The following day, Rachel approached Kumbi. I want to make sure I understood what you said yesterday. Kumbi appeared irritated. What is there not to understand? Rachel acted nervous. I've never done anything like this before. Kumbi sighed. Then she began explaining everything again. Step by step. Detail by detail. The medication. The contamination. the patient, the money, and how Pero would be framed for the incident. Everything. And every word was being recorded. Unaware, Kumbi continued speaking. By the time the conversation ended, hospital management possessed exactly what they needed. Clear evidence. Evidence that would expose not only a conspiracy against Pero but a plot that could have cost an innocent patient their life. Meanwhile, Kumbi remained convinced that her plan was succeeding. She had no idea that the trap she intended for Pero was slowly closing around her instead. And the most dramatic moment was still to come. That night, tension filled the hospital. Then came the report. A message spread quickly through the staff. The patient has died during the shift. Kumbi smiled the moment she heard it. Her plan, in her mind, had worked. She immediately contacted Suzy. Suzy, excited by the news, wasted no time. She reached out to the patient's family and began demanding an autopsy. She presented herself as a concerned activist seeking justice. But what neither of them knew was the truth. The patient had not died. The injection had never been administered. The report was part of a controlled investigation. A carefully managed operation designed to expose the conspiracy. When Kumbi later arrived at the hospital, confident and expectant, she was met instead by security officers. Her expression changed instantly. Confusion replaced confidence. "What is going on?" she asked. But there was no need for explanation. The evidence was already waiting. The recordings were played back to her. Her own voice filled the room. Her instructions. Her agreement. Her plan. Everything she had said. Her face turned pale. For the first time, she realized the truth. She had been recorded. And there was no escape. Under questioning, Kumbi broke down. She confessed to her role in the plot. And in her panic, she mentioned Suzy's involvement as well. That single confession widened the investigation. Within days, Suzy was also arrested. Both women now faced criminal charges. Conspiracy. Attempted harm. And obstruction of justice. The case moved swiftly through legal proceedings. And eventually, both were sentenced to prison. Meanwhile, life outside the courtroom continued to move forward. Pero was fully cleared of all suspicion. Her name remained clean. Her reputation stronger than ever. The hospital publicly acknowledged her professionalism and integrity. Tade, who had followed everything closely, stood by her throughout the ordeal. Their bond, already strong, deepened even further. This time, there were no doubts. No interference. No distractions. Just trust. And love built on truth. Not long after, Tade proposed to Pero. And she accepted. Their wedding was simple but beautiful. Filled with joy, gratitude, and the presence of those who truly mattered. Kumbi's downfall became a lesson for the entire community. Suzy's ambition became a warning about jealousy without wisdom. And Pero's humility became a symbol of quiet strength rewarded in time. Years later, Tade and Pero would look back on everything that's happened. The village rivalry. The jealousy. The conspiracy. The false accusations. And the moment everything almost fell apart. But what remained strongest in their memory was simple. That sometimes, goodness is tested. But it is never defeated.